Are you an aspiring notary looking to join millions of other notaries? Start your journey with the Notary Public Foundation by Derek Spruill. This essential guide provides the step-by-step process to becoming commissioned in your state. Don't stumble into the role. Walk into it with confidence. Grab your copy of the Notary Public Foundation by Derek Spruill on Amazon today.
So imagine just holding this small, unassuming plastic device right in the palm of your hand.
Yeah, it basically weighs less than a cell phone.
Right. It fits easily into a pocket or a purse. And honestly, it just looks like a standard office supply you could grab from a big box store for what, like $10?
Exactly. It looks totally mundane.
But the moment you press that little piece of rubber onto a sheet of paper, you wield this extraordinary power. You have the power to transfer $1 million commercial property or, authorize life or death medical decisions.
Or finalize an international corporate merger.
Yeah, that is the immense, just staggering power of the notary seal. And I think because it looks so ordinary, it is shockingly easy to mishandle.
Well, it's kind of the ultimate paradox of the profession, isn't it?
Yeah.
We are handed the sovereign authority of the state, but the tool that represents that authority just looks like desk clutter. And because it looks like desk clutter, novices often treat it with this casualness that can, frankly, literally ruin their financial lives. It invites lawsuits, and it can destroy the public trust.
I'm Marylyn.
And I'm Eddie.
Welcome to Notary Knowledge. So, if you are just starting out on your notary journey, if you are a novice or an entry-level notary public trying to figure out how all these complex, sometimes contradictory rules fit together in the real world, you are in the exact right place.
You really are.
We have designed this exploration warmly and encouragingly, specifically with you in mind. You are essentially the third person sitting in the room with us today, and our goal is to make sure you walk away feeling just totally empowered and deeply informed.
But before we introduce today's specific theme, we kind of need to do a quick callback just to ground ourselves.
Yeah, good idea.
In our previous sessions, we spent a lot of time talking about identity proofing. We explored the mechanics of checking an unexpired government-issued ID, relying on credible witnesses, and all those foundational steps.
Right, the steps that ensure the person sitting across the desk from you is exactly who they claim to be.
Exactly. So if you haven't caught those discussions yet, you should absolutely go back and listen to them.
Those prior episodes are really your building blocks. And speaking of building blocks, if you want to elevate your practice from just stamping paper to truly understanding the law, you need the right resources on your desk.
You absolutely do.
We highly encourage you to buy the Notary Knowledge books by Derek Spruill. They are phenomenal, comprehensive guides that every entry-level notary should be referencing constantly. You can find them along with a wealth of other tools by visiting the Notary Knowledge website.
And while you're expanding your knowledge base, make sure to check out our video podcast, No Notary, with Eddie Montes Travis, as well as Marylyn's 90 Seconds of Notary.
Yes, definitely check those out.
Those are just fantastic, quick-hitting visual resources to keep your skills sharp and your mindset focused during the week.
Which brings us perfectly to today's theme. So we are calling this Foundational Fridays, Locking Down the Seal-Stamp Integrity.
It's a big one.
It is. The mission for today's discussion is to facilitate a critical shift in your mindset. We are moving away from being a passive clerk. A passive clerk is someone who just mindlessly stamps a piece of paper, collects a fee, and goes about their day.
Right. We don't want that.
No, we are transitioning you into an active, risk-aware public official. We are operating under the absolute industry maxim that good enough is not a thing.
I really cannot emphasize that maxim enough. Good enough is not a thing. When you are a commissioned notary public, precision is your only shield.
Wow, that's a great way to put it.
It's true. You are a fundamental pillar of the legal and financial infrastructure of this country. And the primary tool of your office, the physical embodiment of your authority, is that official seal.
So today we are going to explore exactly how to protect it, how to maintain its physical and chemical integrity, and precisely what legal protocols you must trigger if the unthinkable happens and it goes missing.
That's going to be an incredibly eye-opening conversation for you.
It really is. We are going to jump right into the weight of the seal and the public trust in just a moment, right after this quick commercial break.
Stay with us.
All right, we are back, and we are starting with the conceptual weight of the notary seal. So let's paint a picture here. When you first get your commission approved, you usually receive a package in the mail from a vendor with your brand new stamp, right?
Yep, usually wrapped in a bunch of bubble wrap.
Exactly. You take it out of the bubble wrap, and it is really easy to look at it and just see a piece of rubber and plastic. But legally speaking, what is actually sitting in the palm of your hand?
Well, what you are holding is the physical representation of the state's sovereign authority.
That sounds intense.
It is. When the governor or the secretary of state commissions you, they are effectively deputizing you. They are granting you the power to act as an impartial, reliable witness on behalf of the state government itself. That piece of rubber and plastic is your official signature. So when you affix that seal to a document, it establishes a legal presumption of authenticity and proper execution in the eyes of the law.
I want to pause on that phrase right there, presumption of authenticity, because that presumption directly affects the substantive legal rights of other people.
Absolutely.
Like if you stamp a real estate deed, you are telling the entire world, I, a vetted public official, verified that this property transfer was executed properly by the right person of their own free will.
Exactly. Institutions, courts, and innocent third parties are going to rely entirely on that ink impression to transfer wealth, grant medical authority, and enforce binding contracts.
So because it holds that level of societal power, we really have to talk about a concept known as non-delegability and ownership integrity.
Yes, this is a foundational rule that every novice needs to memorize immediately. A notarial commission is strictly non-transferable, period. Under absolutely no circumstances can you ever allow a coworker, a boss, an assistant, or even a family member to use your stamp. The authority belongs to you, and the physical tool belongs to you alone.
And this brings up a massive point of friction in the real world, particularly for notaries who get their commission through their workplace. I mean, this happens constantly.
Oh, all the times.
You work at a bank, a law firm, maybe a real estate agency, or a car dealership. Your employer comes to you and says, hey, we need an in-house notary to speed up our paperwork.
Right, and they say, we'll pay for everything.
Exactly. They say, we will pay for your application fee, we will pay for your state bond, and we will buy all your supplies, including your stamp and your journal. So because the corporate entity paid the invoice for the supplies, the employer naturally assumes they own the stamp as company property.
And that assumption is unequivocally false under the law.
So they don't own it.
Not at all. Even if an employer pays for the commission application, the surety bond, the training, and every single piece of physical equipment, the notary retains sole personal ownership of the seal and the journal.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, this ownership remains completely intact during your employment, and crucially, it remains intact upon termination of your employment. When you leave that job, whether you quit or are fired, that stamp and that journal walk out the door with you.
I can hear people listening right now thinking, but my boss would never allow that. They paid for it out of the corporate expense account.
I know. Employers play hardball with this all the time.
They really do. They will demand you leave the stamp in the desk drawer for the next employee to use.
So what is the actual legal reality for the notary in that confrontation?
The legal reality is that the employer is attempting to commit a crime, and you must assert your legal right to your equipment. Let's look at the jurisprudence on this.
Okay, let's hear.
In Texas, for example, this issue became so prevalent that the Texas Attorney General had to issue a formal opinion on it, Opinion GA 0723. And what did that say?
This opinion explicitly establishes that an employer has absolutely zero legal authority to retain a notary's seal, journal, or commission certificate, regardless of who paid for it. The state's sovereign commission completely supersedes corporate property policies.
And Florida laws are equally, if not more, aggressive about this, right?
Oh, they are. Florida statutes expressly prohibit an employer from withholding a seal under any circumstances. In fact, in Florida, unlawful possession of a notary seal by someone other than the commissioned notary is a second-degree misdemeanor.
Wait, a misdemeanor?
Yes. That carries potential jail time and significant fines. The state does not mess around with the integrity of the seal.
Okay, so let's put you in this scenario. You are sitting at your desk on your last day of work. Your manager walks up and demands you hand over the stamp. You explain the law, but they refuse to listen, and they physically lock the stamp in a filing cabinet and tell you to leave the premises.
Which happens.
Right. Obviously, you shouldn't get into a physical altercation over a piece of plastic. So what is the protocol?
First rule, never escalate to a physical conflict. If an employer flat out refuses to release your items and locks them away, you have a very specific set of actions to take. First, you must immediately assert your legal right in writing.
Like an email.
Send an email or a certified letter stating they are illegally withholding your seal. If they still refuse, you must report the employer to your state commissioning authority and to local law enforcement, explaining that your official seal is being held hostage.
Wow, okay.
And at that point, you must completely abandon that old seal. You obtain a brand new seal, you start a brand new sequential journal, and in that new journal, you document exactly why you had to replace your tools, specifically noting the employer's refusal to return them.
It really requires a total paradigm shift in how you view that stamp. Let me ask you a provocative question to really hammer this home for you. Would you ever leave your personal wallet, your physical Social Security card, and all of your cash just sitting out on a shared office desk for anyone to grab while you went to lunch?
Not for a second. You'd be constantly anxious.
Right. You would guard those items with your life because they represent your identity and your financial security. That is the exact mindset you need to adopt for guarding the notary seal.
It is your official identity.
Exactly. If someone takes your wallet, they might drain your checking account. If someone takes your unguarded notary stamp, they can forge a deed and steal someone's entire house, and you could be held personally liable for that catastrophic loss.
That analogy perfectly encapsulates the stakes.
Yeah.
You have to treat the stamp with the same defensive paranoia you treat your most sensitive personal documents.
And we are going to dive incredibly deep into the exact physical security protocols you need to follow every single day and the environmental factors that can literally destroy your equipment right after this quick commercial break.
We'll be right back.
Welcome back to our exploration of stamp integrity. Before we paused, we established that your seal is essentially your official identity and must be guarded like your Social Security card. So let me break down the practical, everyday application of that security.
Sounds good.
The industry guidelines lay out 4 do's and don'ts of storage that every single notary needs to internalize.
Yeah, these 4 rules are your baseline defense against fraud. Number 1, don't leave your notary journal and seal unattended.
Which sounds like basic common sense, right?
It does, but it is violated constantly. Imagine you are a mobile notary at a signing table, in a busy coffee shop, or maybe a hectic real estate office. You need to use the restroom, or you step outside to take a phone call because the signer is running late. You leave your tote bag with your stamp and journal sitting right there on the table.
Ooh.
That is a massive breach of professional standards. You must maintain constant visual and physical control of those tools during any signing ceremony. If you leave the room, the bag goes with you.
Because it really only takes 3 seconds for someone to reach into an open bag and pocket a stamp.
Exactly.
Okay, rule number 2, store your notary journal and seal in a secure, locked area. When you are not actively performing a notarization, that stamp cannot just sit in a pencil cup on your desk. In an office setting, it needs to be in a secure, locked drawer or a specialized locking tote bag. And here is the kicker. The key or combination to that lock must be accessible only to you, the commissioned notary. Not your boss, not the office manager who holds the master keys, not your spouse at home, just you.
Right. Rule number 3, don't lend your notary seal and journal to anyone. We touched on this with the non-delegability concept, but it bears repeating because of how often workplace culture pressures notaries to bend the rules.
Oh, yeah. Like, hey, can you just stamp this real quick for me?
Exactly. You cannot let your administrative assistant prep the documents by stamping them ahead of time while you are on a call. You cannot let a coworker borrow your stamp just because they lost theirs and they have a client waiting. It is your signature. You wouldn't let someone forge your signature on a check, so you cannot let them use your stamp.
And rule number 4, follow state rules for disposal of old notary seals and journals. You know, when your commission expires, or if you change your legal name, or if you resign your commission, you cannot just throw your stamp in the kitchen trash can.
Please don't do that.
Dumpster diving is a real method of identity theft. If someone fishes your intact stamp out of the garbage, they can backdate fraudulent documents. You need to physically destroy the rubber die. Take a pair of heavy scissors or a craft knife and cut the rubber lettering into tiny pieces. Deface it completely so it can never make a cohesive impression again.
And for your journals, states have wildly different retention rules.
Really? Like what?
Well, Oregon, for example, requires you to securely keep your journal for at least 10 years from the date of the last notarization recorded in it.
10 years?
Yeah. Other states require you to physically surrender the old journal to the county clerk's office upon resignation. You always have to verify your specific state's disposal and retention laws.
Now, beyond the controlled environment of a corporate office, we have to talk about mobile notaries and the extreme vulnerability of vehicles. Leaving your equipment in a vehicle, whether it's tucked in a glove box, hidden under the passenger seat, or locked in the trunk overnight or for prolonged periods, is a massive security risk.
It's a huge target.
Right. Unattended vehicles are incredibly vulnerable to break-ins. In fact, vehicle burglaries are one of the primary sources of credential theft nationwide. If a thief smashes your car window in the middle of the night to grab a backpack they see in the back seat and your stamp and journal are inside, you have just armed a fraudster. Mobile notaries must carry their equipment into their homes at the end of every single day.
And leaving your stamp in a car isn't just a theft risk, it's a severe environmental hazard. Protecting your stamp isn't solely about security, it is about physical preservation.
Oh, right, the weather.
Exactly. Storing a stamp in an environment with extreme temperatures, like a vehicle glove box during a sweltering summer, or even on a desk directly beneath an office heating vent, accelerates the degradation of the device on a molecular level.
I was actually reading a story recently, and this is a highly relatable anecdote for any notary working in a warm climate. There was a notary who left their bag in their car during a hot July afternoon.
Oh, no.
Yeah, they went into a signing later that evening, pulled out their stamp, and confidently pressed down on the document. Instead of a crisp, black, authoritative seal, they just got a smeared, illegible, gooey blotch on the paper. The stamp had literally melted in the hot car.
The physics behind that are fascinating, honestly, and highly destructive. High temperatures cause the solvents in the ink to evaporate prematurely, drying out the pad. But worse than that, the heat attacks the adhesive backing.
The glue holding it together.
Right. The rubber die is attached to the plastic or wooden mount using industrial adhesives. When subjected to high heat, that adhesive weakens and turns gelatinous. When that adhesive fails, the rubber die can shift out of alignment, so your text is suddenly slanted or overlapping. Or even worse, the rubber die completely detaches from the mechanism.
So you press down, and the rubber piece just slides off and sticks to the client's paper instead of the stamp. That is an absolute nightmare scenario when you are sitting in front of a client trying to look like a competent professional.
It's so embarrassing. And cold temperatures present a completely different set of problems, particularly for stamps that use oil-based inks.
What does the cold do?
If you leave a pre-inked stamp in a freezing car overnight in the winter, the low temperatures cause the oil-based ink to thicken. The viscosity of the oil increases dramatically. It loses its ability to flow through the microscopic pores of the rubber. The result is a very faint, patchy, ghost-like impression that will absolutely not meet the legal standards for a photographically reproducible seal.
And we can't forget about the sun. Ultraviolet light is incredibly damaging to synthetic materials.
Yeah, prolonged exposure to direct UV light, like leaving your stamp sitting on a sunny windowsill in your home office, actually breaks down the synthetic polymers in both the plastic stamp frame and the rubber die itself. The material loses its elasticity, becomes brittle, and eventually cracks. To maintain the longevity and precision of your device, it absolutely must be kept in a clean, dry, climate-controlled environment.
But the physical environment is really just one part of the maintenance equation. Coming up, we're going to dive deeply into the actual internal mechanics of these devices and the specific chemistry of the ink. Because if you use the wrong refill bottle, you can permanently destroy your equipment in a matter of seconds. We'll explore exactly how that works in just a moment.
Stick around.
Welcome back to Notary Knowledge, and we are getting into the chemistry of the impression. If you are going to be a true professional, you cannot just view your stamp as a magic box that puts ink on paper. You need to understand the tools of your trade down to the mechanical and molecular level.
You really do.
You have to know what kind of machine you are holding in your hand. Notary stamps generally fall into two main mechanical categories, and you really need to understand the difference before you ever try to refill them.
Right. The two main categories are self-inking stamps and pre-inked stamps. They operate using entirely different physical mechanics and, crucially, entirely different ink chemistries.
Okay, let's start with self-inking stamps.
So these are like the standard Trodat or 2000 plus models you see everywhere. These utilize a rotating mechanical platform. When you press down on the handle, the rubber die physically flips 180 degrees, strikes the paper to leave the impression, and when you release the handle, it flips back up to rest against a hidden internal ink pad.
Right, and because of that rapid flipping mechanism and the need for the ink to sit on an open pad without gumming up the gears, self-inking stamps strictly require water-based ink.
Yes.
The water-based formula is thin, it has a low viscosity, which allows it to absorb quickly into the open cell foam of that internal pad. More importantly, it dries very rapidly on porous paper surfaces, preventing smudging when you stack documents.
Now compare that to a pre-ink stamp, like a Maxlite or a Super Slim model. These do not have a rotating flipping mechanism.
So the rubber die doesn't move.
The rubber die does not move. Instead, the ink is held within a reservoir directly behind a microscopic, porous, synthetic rubber die. The ink essentially seeps through the die itself when you apply downward pressure. Pre-inked stamps require specialized oil-based inks. The heavy oil base ensures incredibly rich, high-contrast, permanent impressions.
Yeah.
And most importantly, the oil prevents the ink from prematurely drying out while sitting inside that internal reservoir for months at a time.
Okay, so water-based ink is for self-inking stamps with flipping mechanisms, and oil-based ink is for pre-inked stamps with internal reservoirs. This is where novices make a fatal, expensive error.
They really do.
They run out of ink, they panic, they run to a local office supply store, they grab a generic bottle of black ink off the shelf, and they squeeze it into their stamp without checking the chemistry. I like to compare mixing stamp inks to putting diesel fuel into a standard gasoline engine like a Honda Civic.
That's a great comparison.
If you put diesel in a Civic, you don't just get bad gas mileage, you trigger a catastrophic mechanical failure that completely totals the internal machinery of the engine.
And that is exactly what happens on a chemical level when you cross-contaminate stamp inks. It is basic chemistry. Oil and water do not mix. If you put oil-based ink into a water-based self-inking pad, or if you squeeze water-based ink into the reservoir of an oil-based pre-inked stamp, the introduction of the mismatched solvent triggers immediate phase separation.
Phase separation.
Yeah, the chemical reaction violently alters the ink's viscosity, causing the pigments to coagulate. It turns into this sticky, thick, immovable goo. And once that goo forms, it permanently clogs the microscopic pores of the rubber die.
And once those pores are clogged with that chemical goo, your stamp is ruined.
Yeah.
There's no coming back from it. You will get faint, patchy, or entirely illegible impressions forever. You can't just rinse it out in the sink.
No, you absolutely cannot.
You have to throw the entire stamp away and order a new one. And remember, you cannot notarize anything while you wait for the replacement to arrive in the mail, which means you are losing business.
To avoid totaling your stamp, you must follow precise re-inking procedures based on the exact model you own. Let's walk through the specifics so you have the exact steps.
Good idea. Let's say I have a Trotter.
If you have a Trodat self-inking stamp, you need to slightly compress the stamp body about 1/8 of an inch. This separates the rubber die from the internal pad. You push the side buttons to lock it in that separated position, and you pull the cartridge pad out. You only apply 10 to 20 drops of water-based ink, spreading it evenly across the pad.
Just 10 to 20 drops.
Yes. Then you slide it back in, and this is key. Let it rest for 5 to 10 minutes to absorb before you unlock it and test it.
I want to highlight the volume there, just 10 to 20 drops. More is not better. If you oversaturate a water-based pad, the ink will pool on the surface. When the die hits it, it will flood the rubber letters, and your stamp will just look like a giant black blob on the paper where you can't read your name or your commission number.
That's exactly right. Now, if you have a pre-inked Maxlite, the process is vastly different. You remove the handle grip to access the internal reservoir ports. You apply 3 to 24 drops of oil-based ink directly into the ports, depending on the physical size of the stamp.
Okay, pretty straightforward so far.
But then, you must replace the handle, store the stamp in an upright position, and let it sit overnight, approximately 12 hours.
12 hours.
Yep. The thick oil needs that prolonged time to slowly seep through the microscopic pores of the die. If you try to use it 10 minutes after refilling, it simply won't work.
That overnight resting period is such a crucial piece of operational knowledge.
Yeah.
You cannot refill a pre-ink stamp 10 minutes before a major signing appointment. You have to anticipate your ink levels and do it the night before. This naturally leads into the other maintenance issue, keeping the stamp physically clean. Over time, that rubber die is going to pick up lint, dust, and microscopic paper fibers, especially if you are stamping a lot of heavy, textured legal paper. What is the safest way to clean that delicate rubber surface without ruining it?
Well, the absolute best, safest method for routine cleaning requires no special chemicals at all. It's simple cellophane tape.
Like Scotch tape.
Exactly. You just take a piece of clear tape, press it gently across the text of the die, and lift it off. The adhesive on the tape pulls all the dust and paper fibers away without damaging the delicate rubber lettering or introducing any harsh liquids into the system.
But what if it's really gunky? What if you need a deep clean because of ink buildup over several years? I know a lot of people just grab whatever is sitting on their desk, like a pump of hand sanitizer or an alcohol wipe.
You must never, ever use hand sanitizer, high-percentage rubbing alcohol, or acetone on your stamp. It is highly destructive.
Walk us through why that is so destructive. Why does alcohol ruin rubber?
It comes down to the chemistry of the synthetic rubber. Those alcohol-based products and aggressive solvents act as chemical extractors. They literally extract the plasticizers from the synthetic rubber dyes.
Plasticide.
Yeah, plasticizers are the additives that keep the rubber flexible and elastic. When the plasticizers are leached out by the alcohol, the rubber loses its elasticity. It becomes brittle, it dries out, and it will begin to crack, crumble, and dissolve over time.
Oh, wow. So it literally falls apart.
Exactly. Acetone is even worse. It will actually melt the acrylic and plastic components of the stamp housing. If you absolutely need a deep clean, you must use specific, non-toxic, acid-free stamp cleaners. For water-based stamps, a mild, highly diluted dish soap on a damp cloth works well. For oil-based, you need a dedicated solvent cleaner designed specifically for archival inks. But again, tape is your best first line of defense.
Guarding your stamp, understanding its mechanics, and protecting its chemistry, these are the hallmarks of a professional who respects the office. Up next, we are going to look at the historical reasons why the ink on that stamp looks the way it does and explore the wild variations in state laws regarding ink color and embossers. We'll be right back.
Don't go away.
Welcome back. We've talked extensively about how to store your stamp and how to refill it. Now we need to talk about what that stamp actually looks like when it hits the paper. And to fully grasp the rigid rules around ink, we have to take a quick trip back in time to understand the historical, technological context of a legal concept called photographical reproducibility.
Photographical reproducibility is the strict legal requirement that a notary seal must be clearly visible, legible, and capable of being reproduced when a document is copied or scanned by a receiving agency.
Okay, so it has to show up on a copier.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But understand why this is a law, you have to look back at the history of county recorders and public land registries. For decades, long before digital flatbed scanners existed, county clerks used massive black and white microfilm cameras and early xerographic copiers to permanently record property deeds and mortgages.
And those old microfilm cameras were highly flawed by modern standards. They operated on strict black and white contrast thresholds. They simply could not capture faint colors, light blues, reds, or raised, uninked, embossed impressions. If a seal didn't show up on the microfilm legally, it was as if the document was never notarized. An invisible seal could completely invalidate a property transfer, throwing chain of title into total chaos.
And this isn't just a historical artifact. Even today, modern high-speed digital scanners used in public land registries still convert documents into high-contrast black and white digital images to save server space. If the ink on your stamp doesn't provide sufficient contrast against the white paper, the fine details, like your commission expiration date or the spelling of your name, can be completely washed out and erased in the digital copy.
That makes total sense.
That is why black ink is historically considered the universal gold standard for photographic contrast. States like Florida and Missouri, for instance, strictly mandate the use of black ink for their notaries to ensure perfect contrast on every single document.
But this is where the laws get wildly localized and potentially dangerous for novices. Not every state requires black ink. In fact, some states actively forbid it. You cannot just jump online to a custom stamp website and buy whatever color stamp matches your branding. I want to push back gently on a trend I see with novice notaries.
What trend is that?
They go to a vendor, they see a bright blue, pink, or red stamp, and they just buy it because they like the aesthetic without ever checking their state handbook. A novice could easily buy a blue stamp for a Florida notarization, stamp a massive commercial mortgage document, and accidentally invalidate an entire real estate transaction just because Florida law demands black ink.
It is a critical error, and it happens way more than you would think. You must know your jurisdiction's unique mandates. Let's look at some of the variations. While Florida requires black, Utah takes the exact opposite approach. Utah strictly requires that a notary seal use purple ink.
Purple? Really?
Yes, if you use black ink in Utah, you are actively violating statute, and your notarizations can be rejected by the county clerk.
And then you have Tennessee. Tennessee has a fascinating, seemingly strange rule. They mandate that you must use any color that is not black or yellow.
Yes, Tennessee requires a color like blue, green, or violet. When you first hear that, it sounds arbitrary, but the logic there is actually very sound and rooted in fraud prevention.
How so?
By requiring a color other than black, it makes it instantly easy for receiving agencies to differentiate the original wet ink document from a black and white photocopy. A clerk can look at the paper and immediately see the blue ink, knowing it's the original. Yet, colors like blue or green remain dark enough to be perfectly legible when the document is eventually scanned into the system. Yellow is banned because it lacks the contrast to show up on a scanner at all. It just vanishes.
It's all about balancing contrast for machines and original identification for human eyes. And this brings us to the difference between ink stamps and embossers. We mentioned earlier that microfilm couldn't pick up raised, uninked impressions. An embosser is a traditional metal crimping device. It pinches the paper fibers to create a raised, tactile seal, but it doesn't transfer any ink to the paper.
Exactly. An embosser by itself is generally not photographically reproducible. If you hold an embossed piece of paper up to a window, you can read the shadows of the text perfectly. But if you run it through a standard flatbed scanner, the light washes out the shadows, and it just looks like a blank, empty space on the digital copy.
Which is a huge problem.
Because of this fatal flaw in reproducibility, many states have entirely transitioned to requiring inked rubber stamps as a primary official seal. However, some states still allow embossers, or notaries, just like to use them for the traditional, ceremonial, authoritative aesthetic.
Which is totally fine. They look incredibly official. But if you are in a state that allows an embosser to act as your official seal, or if you are using it in conjunction with your ink stamp to add a layer of security, you have to ensure it can be photocopied. How do you actually solve that physical problem?
You have to use a secondary tool called a seal impression inker. It's essentially a specialized, small, dense ink pad. After you crimp the paper with the embosser, you take the impression inker and press it lightly over the raised crimp. It darkens the raised text, highlighting the peaks of the embossed paper with black ink, making it highly visible and fully photographically reproducible for digital scanners.
So you ink the bump, essentially.
Right. If you don't ink the embossment in a state that requires reproducibility, and the receiving agency scans it and sees nothing, the entire document could be rejected, and you will have an angry client calling you.
So to recap this crucial section, know your state's ink color requirements. Know if you are an ink stamp only state or if you can use an embosser. And if you use an embosser, know how to make it reproducible. Do the research before you buy the equipment. Coming up, we are going to pivot to the darkest timeline. What happens when your security fails, your stamp is stolen, and a fraudster uses it to steal a house? We are going to cover the liability, the insurance realities, and the exact 7-step incident response protocol you need to memorize. We'll be right back.
Stay tuned.
Welcome back to Notary Knowledge. We have reached the nightmare scenario. We've spent the first half of this exploration talking about how to protect your seal. But what happens if those protections fail? What happens if you accidentally leave your bag in your car, your window gets smashed in a parking garage, and your notary stamp is stolen?
It's the moment every notary dreads. When a notary public fails to properly secure their seal, and that seal falls into the hands of a bad actor, the resulting legal and financial liabilities for the notary are severe. Because that stamp represents your official signature and carries the presumption of authenticity, a fraudster can use it to forge property deeds, drain bank accounts through fraudulent powers of attorney, or execute fake corporate contracts.
And when the dust settles, you're going to be caught right in the middle of the legal fallout.
You absolutely will be.
This brings us to a foundational concept in civil tort law that every notary needs to understand: proximate cause. If your unsecured stamp is stolen and used for fraud, the victim who lost their life savings or their property is going to look for someone to sue to make them whole. And they are going to look right at you. The legal argument plaintiff attorneys use is that your failure to properly safeguard your seal, your negligence, was the proximate cause of their financial injury. The argument is simple. If you had locked it up in a secure tote bag, the thief couldn't have stolen it, the fraud couldn't have happened, and the victim wouldn't have lost their house.
That is exactly how it plays out in court. If a judge or jury finds that you left your seal unattended on a counter or in a highly vulnerable vehicle overnight, you can be held personally financially liable for all resulting damages. That includes the victim's restitution, their legal fees, and your own court costs. The financial exposure is absolutely staggering, often running into the hundreds of thousands of dollars for real estate fraud.
And this is where we have to address one of the most dangerous, pervasive misconceptions in the entire notary industry, We call it the surety bond subrogation misconception.
Oh, this one is so important.
Novice notaries often think, well, my state required me to buy $10,000 or $15,000 surety bond when I submitted my application. So if I make a mistake or get sued for negligence, that bond is my insurance. It will protect me and pay the damages, right?
Wrong. Absolutely. Fundamentally wrong. A surety bond does not protect you, the notary, in any way, shape, or form. A surety bond is a three-party agreement designed by the state to protect the public from you.
Protect the public from you. Okay, explain that.
If a member of the public suffers financial harm due to your misconduct or your negligence, like leaving your stamp in a car where it got stolen and used for a forged deed, they can file a claim against your surety bond. The surety company will investigate, and if the claim is valid, they will pay the victim up to the limit of the bond, say $10,000. But the transaction absolutely does not end there.
No, it doesn't. And this is the incredibly painful part that novices don't realize until it's too late. Walk us through what happens next.
Under the legal principle of subrogation, the surety company will immediately turn around and seek full reimbursement from you, the notary. If they paid out $10,000 to the victim to settle the claim, they're going to send you a demand letter and potentially sue you for $10,000 to recover their money. They will come after your personal assets, your savings accounts. They can even garnish your wages. You have zero financial protection from a surety bond.
The only thing that actually protects the notary's personal assets is errors and omissions insurance, commonly known as E&O insurance. E&O insurance is a true insurance policy that actually defends you in court. Unlike a surety bond, an E&O policy pays for your legal defense fees, your settlement costs, and court-ordered damages up to the policy limit, and they do not ask you to pay them back.
And you need that defense coverage desperately, even if you are entirely innocent of any wrongdoing. Let's look at a hypothetical. Let's say you didn't lose your stamp. You keep it locked up perfectly. But a highly sophisticated fraudster manages to perfectly counterfeit your seal based on a public document they found at the county clerk.
So you didn't even do anything wrong.
Right, you are totally innocent. But when the forged document surfaces, you are still going to be named in the lawsuit. You still have to hire a defense attorney to prove your innocence in court. Data from the National Notary Association shows that the average cost to mount a legal defense just to be dismissed from a civil lawsuit involving notary seal forgery is nearly $7,000, and it can frequently exceed $25,000. Without E&O insurance, you're paying that $25,000 retainer out of your own pocket just to prove you didn't do it.
So, rule number 1 of liability management, get E&O insurance. But let's go back to the scenario where you discover your physical stamp is actually missing. You've searched your desk, your car, your house, and it is gone. You need to act immediately to limit your liability and comply with state laws. There is a critical 7-step incident response protocol you must follow. We need to break this down step by step.
Step 1. Cease operations immediately. You must stop performing all notarizations under that commission the very second you realize the seal is missing. You cannot borrow a friend's stamp. You cannot write your commission information by hand and draw a box around it. You are completely sidelined until the issue is legally resolved.
Makes sense. Okay, step 2.
Step 2. Conduct a diligent search. Retrace your steps, empty your bags, check behind the desk, call the coffee shop. Verify that the seal is truly missing and not just temporarily misplaced in a coat pocket.
And if it is really gone?
Step 3, file a police report. If you suspect theft, or if it was lost in a public place where a bad actor could find it, you must file a formal report with local law enforcement. Provide a detailed description of the stamp, the brand, the physical size, the ink color, and the serial number if your state issues one. You need that official police report number as hard evidence that you took the law seriously and acted responsibly.
Step 4 is where the ticking clock starts. You have to notify your state commissioning authority, and the timelines are brutally strict depending on where you live. This isn't a get around to it next week situation.
That's right. The timelines are unforgiving. In California, you must notify the Secretary of State immediately upon discovery of the loss or theft, and it must be done via certified or registered mail. In Texas and Florida, the statutory requirement is also immediately.
Wow, immediately. What about other states?
If you are in Arizona, you have exactly 10 days to send a signed notice by certified mail. In Pennsylvania, you have 15 days to submit a specific form on their digital portal. If you fail to notify the state within their mandated time frame, you can face severe administrative fines, suspension, or outright revocation of your commission.
All right, what's step 5?
Step 5, notify your insurer. Contact your surety bond provider and your E&O insurance provider. You want to document the event and establish an evidentiary record with them in case a fraudulent claim arises months or years down the line.
Now, step 6 is my absolute favorite part of this entire protocol because it is pure strategic genius. Step 6 is order a distinguishable replacement seal. Explain why this is so critical.
When you contact a vendor to order your new stamp, you cannot just reorder the exact same design you had before. You must choose a design that is visually distinct from the lost or stolen seal. If your old stamp was a rectangular self-inker with black ink, order a round stamp. If your state allows variations, order a stamp with a different border style, a different font for your name, or a different permitted ink color.
This acts as an immediate forensic shield for the notary. I want everyone to think about how brilliant this is. If your old rectangular stamp was stolen on June 1st and you ordered a new round stamp on June 2nd, you have created a clear visual dividing line in your career. If, 2 years later, a forged document surfaces dated August 15th and it has the stolen rectangular stamp on it, you don't have to spend $25,000 proving your innocence. You can instantly prove to a judge, Your Honor, that is a forgery. My rectangular stamp was stolen on June 1st. Here is the police report to prove it. And as of June 2nd, I have exclusively used this new round stamp. It instantly proves you did not notarize that fraudulent document.
It completely breaks the chain of liability. It is the smartest thing you can do. And finally, step 7, record the event in a new journal. You must document the exact date of the loss, the police report number, and the date you put your new distinguishable stamp into service right there in your sequential journal records, so your official record reflects the change in your tools.
That 7-step protocol is your professional life raft. Memorize it. Coming up, we're going to apply everything we've talked about today, from privacy laws to ink colors to embossers to real-world scenarios. It's time for our listener favorite segment, Good Question, What Would You Do? We'll be right back.
See you in a minute.
Welcome back to Notary Knowledge. We have reached the part of the exploration where we take all this dense foundational knowledge, all these statutes and chemical properties, and we apply them to the messy, real world. It's time for a segment we like to call Good Question, What Would You Do? We have pulled a few fantastic, highly specific scenarios from our listeners, and our expert is going to break down exactly how to handle them based on state laws. Are you ready?
I am ready. These real-world scenarios are where the rubber meets the road. Let's hear the first one.
All right, our first scenario comes from Whitney in Wisconsin. Whitney writes, I have a signer who needs a document notarized, but they have no ID. We are going to use a credible witness to identify them. However, the document they are signing contains highly sensitive medical information, and I'm worried about reviewing it or keeping records of it. How should I handle the witness, and what are my privacy obligations regarding the document itself?
That is a phenomenal question, Whitney. You are balancing two distinct, sometimes conflicting duties here. Your duty to perform rigorous identity verification and your statutory duty to maintain privacy. Let's synthesize Wisconsin law to find the path forward.
Okay, let's start with the privacy part.
Right. Regarding privacy, Wisconsin law, WS 140.02, 5MID, is incredibly strict. It requires notaries to keep all documents and information provided to them completely confidential. You are prohibited from selling, transferring, or disclosing personally identifiable information. In practical terms at the signing table, this means you should only review the document just enough to ensure it is complete.
Meaning what, exactly?
Meaning you scan the pages to ensure there are no blank spaces that can be filled in fraudulently later, and to note the document type, like medical directive, for your journal. You absolutely do not need to and should not read the sensitive medical details. And crucially, you must absolutely never make or keep photocopies of the signer's documents as evidence that you did your job. Keeping copies in your files is a massive privacy liability.
I'm glad you brought up the photocopy issue because some novices think keeping a copy of the ID or the document protects them. It doesn't. It makes them a target for data breaches. Now, what about the credible witness part of her question? How does she administer that mechanically?
For the credible witness, you must formally put them under oath before you proceed with the notarization. You look them in the eye and administer an oath similar to this. Do you solemnly swear that you personally know the signer and that they truly hold the identity they claim? So help you God. Once the witness swears to that, they are legally acting as the human ID for your signer under penalty of perjury. You then record the witness's information, their name, and their signature in your journal alongside the signer's act. But again, guard that journal closely to protect everyone's privacy.
Great breakdown. Let's move to scenario 2. This comes from Connie in Connecticut. Connie says, I have a document that needs notarization, but it is crammed with text and there is absolutely no room on the page for my stamp. Also, I know that in Connecticut, using a physical seal is actually optional. Should I just stamp an additional blank page and staple it to the back? Or what is the proper way to handle this without room for my seal?
Connie, this is a very common situational hurdle, and you have to be extremely careful here to avoid facilitating fraud. First, you are correct about your state law. In Connecticut, using an ink stamp or embosser is optional. However, the laws state that if you choose to use one, it must contain specific wording, your name, the words Notary Public, and Connecticut.
Okay, but what about the lack of space?
Now, regarding the lack of physical space on the document, you must never, ever just stamp a blank piece of paper. A notary public seal on a blank page is not a notarial act. It is just an invitation for a fraudster to print whatever contract or deed they want over your seal later, claiming you notarized it.
Right, it's basically handing someone a blank check with your signature on it. So what is the actual physical procedure she needs to execute to attach a seal safely?
Connie must use what is called a loose certificate. She needs to firmly attach, meaning securely staple, not just paperclip, a separate, fully filled out notarial certificate to the main document. That loose certificate will contain the venue, like state and county, the date, the name of the signer, the specific notarial wording like an acknowledgement or jurat, her signature, and her stamp. She must stamp only in the designated area on that attached certificate.
That makes sense. Any other precautions?
Yes, as a critical best practice to prevent fraud, she should write on the bottom of the loose certificate that it is attached to a specific document, naming the document and its page count. For example, attached to a 4-page warranty deed. This prevents a bad actor from removing the staple, detaching the certificate, and stapling it to a fraudulent document.
Perfect. Scenario 3 comes from Tyler in Tennessee. Tyler asks, I am notarizing a deed of trust for a gentleman who is acting as a trustee for an estate. I just bought a brand new high-quality black ink stamp to make sure it photocopies well for the county recorder. Am I good to proceed?
Tyler, stop right there. Do not use that stamp on that document. As we discussed earlier during the photographical reproducibility segment, Tennessee is one of the few states with very specific exclusionary rules on ink color. Under Tennessee Code Annotated 816-114, you are strictly prohibited from using black or yellow ink.
He's going to be so mad he just bought that stamp.
I know, but he must use a color like blue, green, or purple. The law requires a color that is clearly legible and appears black on a non-color copier, but allows officials to distinguish an original from a copy with the naked eye. If you use your new black ink stamp on that deed of trust, you are violating Tennessee statute, and the recording office could reject the deed.
Tyler's going to have to make a quick return to the office supply store. And what about the capacity part of his question? The fact that the signer is representing an estate as a trustee.
That's the second crucial part of his scenario. Tyler must ensure he correctly records the capacity of the signer in the notarial certificate. The certificate needs to explicitly state that the individual is acknowledging the document not just as an individual, but specifically in their legal capacity as trustee. If he just writes the man's name, the document doesn't properly bind the trust. Tyler should follow this specific representative capacity certificate wording guided by the Tennessee State Notary Manuals.
Moving right along, Scenario 4 is from Mary in Maryland. Mary writes, a signer presented me with a state driver's license that expired a year ago and a current valid United States military identification card, also known as a CAC card. Can I accept the military ID? And secondly, Maryland requires the official stamp to be photocopyable. Do I need a special embosser for military and veteran paperwork?
Mary, you have two great questions here, touching on identity and equipment. First, regarding the identity proofing, based on standard identity proofing rules like those detailed in Virginia and Washington, which heavily align with broad national best practices. An expired driver's license is generally not acceptable unless specifically allowed for certain vulnerable populations, like nursing home residents, within a specific time frame.
But the military ID?
A current, unexpired U.S. military identification card is absolutely an acceptable, highly secure form of government-issued ID. You can confidently proceed using the military ID to verify their identity.
And regarding the seal requirement in Maryland, does the nature of the paperwork being military-related change the type of seal she needs? Does she need an embosser?
No, she does not need a special embosser. Maryland law requires that the official stamp of a notary public be capable of being copied, meaning it must be photocopyable. Maryland allows notaries to use either an embosser or an ink stamp. The critical statutory requirement is not the device itself, but that the impression it makes must be capable of being copied together with the record to which it is affixed.
So either one works as long as you can copy it.
Exactly. If she uses a standard black ink stamp, she's perfectly fine. If she prefers an embosser, she must use a seal impression inker to darken the crimped area so it shows up on a scanner. The type of paperwork, military or otherwise, doesn't change Marylyn's fundamental physical seal requirement.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
The equipment rules are dictated by the state, not the document.
All right, our final scenario for today. Scenario 5 comes from Emily in South Carolina. Emily says, I absolutely love the traditional ceremonial look of an embosser. I want to use it exclusively for my practice in South Carolina. What do I need to do to ensure it's fully legal for all my transactions? Emily, I agree. Embossers have a wonderful traditional aesthetic that makes clients feel like they are part of a serious legal process. In South Carolina, the law does allow a notary to use either an embosser or an ink stamp as their official seal of office. However, to ensure it is legal, Emily must first verify that the metal die of her embosser contains the exact mandatory elements: her name, the words Notary Public, and the words State of South Carolina. Including the commission expiration date on the seal is optional in SC, but those 3 core elements are mandatory.
But she also has to worry about the recording aspect, right? If she is notarizing a deed that goes to the county clerk, that embosser is going to hit the scanner issue we talked about earlier.
Exactly. This is the operational hurdle with using embossers exclusively. For modern recording in a county clerk's office, the document will be scanned. A plain, uninked, embossed crimp will not show up on the scanner. Therefore, Emily must use a seal impression in inker to darken the raised text every single time she uses it on a document that will be recorded, making it photographically reproducible for digital scanners.
Is there any workaround for that in South Carolina?
Interestingly, South Carolina law has a unique alternative provision. A notary can actually omit the physical seal on a notarial certificate if the notary writes their official title, such as South Carolina Notary Public, directly below their signature.
That's interesting.
But honestly, relying on handwriting your title can look unprofessional or be challenged by out-of-state receiving agencies. Using the embosser with an inker or just maintaining an ink stamp for recorded documents is the safest operational best practice.
Fantastic analysis of those laws. These real-world scenarios really highlight why you can't just operate on autopilot. You have to know the specific, localized nuances of your state's laws, because what is perfectly legal in South Carolina might invalidate a document in Tennessee.
And that wraps up our scenarios for today. It really shows how dynamic this profession can be when you take it seriously.
If you have a situation you're unsure about or a scenario you'd like us to break down on a future exploration, please email your questions to derek@dereksproul.com. We will try to answer as soon as possible at the end of our shows. Before we go, I want to take a moment to acknowledge the incredible team that puts this together. Executive producer Derek Sproul, lead writer Marylyn Lee Trotter, graphics Eddie Montes Travis, music Thomas Bynum, produced by Magnificent Works Business Solutions.
I do want to leave you with one final thought to mull over as you go about your week. We spent this entire hour talking about physical ink, rubber dies, locked desk drawers, and melted adhesives. But as our industry rapidly approaches the year 2030, and we see the widespread legislative adoption of remote online notarization, or RON, the physical ink stamp will eventually be replaced for many transactions.
That is a massive shift.
It is. It will be replaced by digital, tamper-evident cryptographic keys and electronic security certificates. But here's the vital takeaway. The physical tool will change, but the mindset will not. The mindset of security, guarding your digital certificate and your cryptographic passwords with the exact same ferocity and paranoia as your physical rubber stamp, will be the defining trait. The technology evolves, but it is that relentless commitment to security that will forever separate a vulnerable, passive clerk from an elite, liability-proof notary public. Take that mindset into your practice this week.
Don't just be listeners of the knowledge, be doers of the knowledge. This is Notary Knowledge. Until next time.
Are you an aspiring notary looking to join millions of other notaries? Start your journey with the Notary Public Foundation by Derek Sproul. This essential guide provides the step-by-step process to becoming commissioned in your state. Don't stumble into the role. Walk into it with confidence. Grab your copy of the Notary Public Foundation by Derek Sproul on Amazon today.